is one of the photos that was provided by the previous owner. The building inspection file for this property contains no building permit for the single-family dwelling, which likely means it was built prior to bylaws being in place in the mid-70s. The area where the deck is located is supported by what appears to be historically placed fill, as the natural boundary seems to bulge unnaturally compared to their neighboring properties. Since the property owner did not supply a survey was commissioned by this Cowichan Valley Regional District dated November 7th, 2016, to ascertain the location of this construction in relation to the property lines. The survey shows that a portion of the construction, including the deck and cover, is located within the boundaries of this parcel, with the remaining portion and retaining wall trespassing on it to adjacent lands and into the lake. This property was sold on or about September 2017, unbeknownst to CVRD staff. The new property owner claimed he was unaware of any bylaw enforcement issues. Some time was given to the new owner to bring the property into compliance, but it became apparent there was unwillingness to initiate any process to legalize this development. Legalizing this development is fairly complicated and would require, and we're going to get to the after photos. Legalizing this development, it would be challenging, and some areas that come into play are a development permit, a setback variance, and trespass onto adjacent property, and a building permit. Considering the challenges to legalize this development, registering a notice against land title is an appropriate measure at this time. Registering a notice on title does not limit the ability of local government to pursue other actions against the landowner and should not be seen as a final measure. The recommendation today is that a notice against land title be registered against property located at 1812 Shawnigan Lake Road. Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. I'm turning to the area director or alternate. Are there any other questions? Director Morrison.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair, to Mr. Moreno. I think I heard you say that there was a survey done at the CVRD's expense on this. Do we know approximately the cost of this borne by taxpayers?
Through the chair to you, it was approximately, I believe, in the $3,000 range.
Thank you.
Okay. Turning to Director Kuhn.
Yeah, I just wonder, this photograph is taken in 2012. Has this been going on for that long, or when did we get the first complaint?
The first complaint was on 2012. So the construction, the landowner purchased the property. The previous landowner purchased the property in or about 2007. So between 2007 and this date, the landowner was busy doing these updates to the structure, and what happened and when is hard to say. When you drive down the road on Shawnigan Lake Road, you can't really see this from the road, so it's hard to say what happened and when.
Okay, I'm turning to alternate director Goddard. Would you like?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to move the recommendation.
Okay, it's been moved. It's been seconded. Any more discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Oh, sorry.
Madam Chair, just to let you know, the current owner is here today in the presence, and just to let you know.
Okay. Director Nicholson.
So what are the next steps besides this land title thing?
Depending, if authorization is given to register a notice on title, we will register the notice on title.
Point of order. Given
Director
that some of
Morrison?
our next steps may be legal in nature, it shouldn't be discussed in open session.
It would be discussed and closed if you have any questions with that, Director Nicholson. Mr. Blackwell? Okay, okay. All right, seeing no other questions, now I can call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Director Nicholson?
I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention. Did we discuss the correspondence where we're going?
Correspondence came and went, sorry. Did you want to discuss the correspondence now?
Well, it was for discussion, I just,
Sorry?
it was for discussion, so I just wondered.
Okay, would
We
you,
chose not to discuss it, or?
we just moved along. I didn't see any hands up, so would you like to discuss it now?
Well, I don't.
We could go back to that, go ahead.
Well, I'm not sure if people aren't, if this isn't the right time to discuss it, that's fine, but it does seem like it's an
Okay.
opportunity to have a discussion about issues that should be raised
Sure.
at AVICC, so.
Let's move that to the end of the agenda. We will discuss the correspondence. Is that all right, Director Nicholson? Okay, so we'll move C1 to the end of the meeting. Moving on now to R2. Sorry? Welcome, Christina.
Thank you. The application before us today is for application number 02D17, and it's for an official community plan and zoning bylaw amendment. Oh, I just have to be patient. The location of the subject property is on the Trans-Canada Highway in Electoral Area D, and it's located about 200 meters north of Bench Road at that intersection with the Trans-Canada Highway. The existing OCP designation on the property is agricultural, and as you can see, the surrounding area is also largely holding an agricultural designation. There are some rural commercial uses to the southeast of the property, as well as some commercial and industrial designations on the other side of the highway in Electoral Area E. The existing zoning on the property is A7, which is an agricultural service zone, and it permits uses such as food processing and businesses that target the agricultural sector. The A4 zone that wraps around the A7 parcels is agricultural recreation, and currently that is a golf course. And you can see that there are commercial uses and industrial uses, again, to the southeast and on the other side of the highway. Here's a photo of the site. It's likely familiar to many people since the property is visible from the Trans-Canada Highway. As you can see, there's already an existing commercial building on the site, and the property was formerly used as an RV sales and parts. The proposal before us, before you, I should say, is to transition the OCP designation from agricultural resource to rural commercial, and to change the zoning on the property from A7, which is agricultural service, to C2, which is rural commercial 2. In addition, there are some site-specific permitted uses that are proposed as a text amendment to the zoning bylaw. For the property, we're proposing C2 uses with an addition of warehousing, and we're proposing to exclude auction, building supply sales, and wholesale sales from the property, and that was at the suggestion of community members. The slide contains details of what are permitted on the site right now under the A7 zone, as well as what's permitted under the proposed C2 zone, and we can come back to this if there are questions. I'll conclude with a few notes on the background of the application. The application was originally received in November of 2017. The application was referred to provincial agencies and to the APC in April of 2018. In the summer of 2018, the property changed hands and the new owner of the property amended the application. While the previous owner had asked that auto sales and RV sales be permitted on the site, the new owner anticipates to use the site for an event planning business. And following that change of application, in August of 2018, a community meeting was held regarding this application. And in October of 2018, you saw the application here at EASC, and direction was received to prepare amendment bylaws.
I do.
And following from that direction, here we are today with recommendation that the board read the bylaws for the first and second time, and that a public hearing be held. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Okay, are you moving the recommendation?
Would you like me to move the
That would be great.
recommendation?
Thank you so much.
I would do that.
Been moved and seconded. Any more discussion on that? Any more questions?
Make him read it.
Oh, yes, right, you read it, please.
Thank you,
Last
Madam
time.
Chair. The recommendation before you is that it be recommended to the board, one, that the referrals to the ALC, Cowichan Bay Volunteer Fire Department, Cowichan Tribes, and the MOTI be accepted. Two, that CVRD bylaw number 4271, Electoral Area D, Cowichan Bay, OCP Amendment Bylaw at 4831 Trans-Canada Highway, receive first and second reading. Three, that CVRD bylaw number 4272, Electoral Area D, Cowichan Bay, Upland Zoning Amendment Bylaw at 4831 Trans-Canada Highway, receive first and second reading. And four, that a public hearing be held and the public hearing be delegated to the directors for electoral areas D, E, and G.
Okay, I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. That will go to the board March 27th.
Madam Chair, I'd like to raise a point of privilege. I've never had the opportunity to do
Oh,
that
good.
before, and this is
Oh,
a
good.
perfect
Great.
opportunity to do it. I'm finding the odors coming into the chamber here like
I was just
a little
about
tough to take. Is there something that can be done about opening a window or something?
Or some air circulation.
It's,
Oh, they're doing our roof here or next door?
well,
Oh,
that isn't very good
really? It's
timing, is
coming
it?
through the vents. Yeah, it's, really? Oh, opening the window will make it worse? Okay, well, as long as nobody's equipment's on fire or something, because that's
well,
what I
it's-
was smelling.
It's getting worse.
It is. Well, the doors might make a difference. Will the doors make a difference? It's really coming in now. Oh. Way to go. I needed that today. Something new. Point of privilege. Point of privilege. It smells in here. Okay, okay, so we will attempt to move on to R3, and maybe that will suffice to have the doors closed. We're not sure. So looking to Jason, welcome.
Thank you. Before you is a report for a request for inclusion for 3 properties into the Lake Cowichan Fire Protection Area, as on the map.
Thank you. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you so much. Moving on now to R4, waters. Oh, I'm just moving too fast. Okay. Mr. Dennison?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
So,
They do fast business there in public protection. I have 2 reports before you, similar. The first one is on our water systems, and it's on kind of an omnibus bylaw to amend all of our water systems. There's a variety of purposes for it at this time. To let you know, we are working with our colleagues in the administration on a unified and with updated language water bylaw and sewer bylaw, that all of our utilities will be covered under each of those. But that's still ongoing, and there's updating of the language and things like that being done. So that's coming at some point. But in the meantime, we need to do a few things. One is we need to plug a hole in our wording in a number of our bylaws that was with reference to connection fees. And it didn't, the wording wasn't quite correct, and we couldn't actually apply it. We had some legal advice, and that there was a sort of a legal problem there. And so these amendment bylaws fix that. Also, we're changing the term connection fees to capacity charge, because really the charge isn't about the physical connection. It's about using up the capacity of the system. And by these charges, the new connectees bring more money into the system, and then we can use that money later for upgrades as necessary, pipes or reservoirs or whatever it might be, in order to make up for that capacity. So it really is a capacity charge. Also, we're proposing to increase the capacity charges from $3,500, as they are now in almost all of them, to either $5,000, $7,000, or in one case, $17,000. With our systems in which there's problems with either water supply or water quality, and there's more to do and there's more implication there, we're suggesting a $7,000 capacity charge, and the ones in which there isn't as many issues, $5,000. Most of them are in the $7,000 category. And there's one at Burnham where we have already quite a high capacity charge of $17,000, and that's because we're in the throes of upgrades that are quite costly there for a relatively small system. And we're also needing to find some more water. So we've worked that out, and we'd like to keep that as is. In addition to that, we are suggesting, however, on the other side, that we reduce the fees for secondary suites. And there's a bit of logic to that. One is that we're finding if you have too high a barrier for secondary suites, people just go illegal. And then we don't see it at all. And we don't know they're there, we don't know what kind of use what kind of capacity they're using, and we never see any contribution to the system at all. So we think it's wiser to have a more modest fee, so at least we get something, and then they're paying their user fees every year, so we are seeing a contribution, and we know they're there. Also, I think it's not directly of concern to the management of a water system, but it is affordable housing that people can make use of. So that's a sort of, another broader consideration. And also, we're adding some charges for the use of hydrants onto this water one as well, which we don't have now. And we think it's for dust control, suppression in the summertime, and other things like that. It can be a fairly big demand, and we should see some recompense for that. Also, some coverage in case of damage, because that has happened as well. We've been left with damaged hydrants that we have to pay for. So this way, we've got something to cover that.
Righty. So looking to the committee. Director Kuhn.
Yeah, I wonder about the hydrant user permit. We've got a fairly heavy dust problem in Yubo, as you know.
Yes.
And there were some troubles last year because for some reason, I guess there was no reply from the CVRD or something, so the driver of this cleaning vehicle had to go all the way to Dunk to get water, which was absolutely ridiculous. Mm-hmm. So then finally it got sorted out. And so I wonder how much bureaucracy is for these people involved. I mean, it's doing Yubo a favor. I mean, we need it.
Yeah.
So this driver, what does he have to do in order to get that permit?
It's a simple form. You just come in and fill it, and we just need to know who you are and what the purpose is. And then there's a number of days possible that you can specify to use the permit. So it can be weekly or monthly or annual. So if they're anticipating, they can get one permit done once, and then they're good to go for the whole period of time they might need it. They would have to determine that themselves, but they can apply for these various time periods and have their demand, their need covered, and they pay accordingly.
So that was in place previously, wasn't it, or?
Not really, and not comprehensively. So this way, this bylaw covers all of our water systems. Some of them, we never ever see that. It just doesn't come up. Yubo's one where we do, Shawnigan's another one where we do quite often. Those are the two main ones that we see.
Is there a maximum amount of liters they can use, or?
Well, we haven't really limited that. It would be one of the things that, in a case of a shortage, that we would say, no, you're not allowed to. If we have watering restrictions in place beyond level 1, we can say no use of water for dust suppression, if that's critically necessary. That is not expected to ever be the case in Yubo. We have a lot of water in Yubo, so that's not a problem. But, you know, if it came up in one of the smaller systems where we do have constraints, we would then say, no, you can't use it.
Yeah, I just wonder if there could be an exception in Yubo that he doesn't have to go through all this rigmarole, and he can just hook up. He's got the necessary valve.
Yeah.
So I looked into all this stuff, and it was all sorted out. And so I don't know. To me, it's just here's a service that we really need, and for him to provide that service, he has to jump all kinds of hurdles now. And I wonder.
Well, it's
Is that
one
really necessary?
permit they could do once a year. They could do it in January with plenty of notice, and then they'd have it for a year, for example. But at least we know who we are. We've got some money in case of damage, and they're paying appropriately.
It doesn't seem too onerous for once a year, and it does, the responsibility, liability is CVRD, so it's good to know who the person is.
Well, I'm just not in favor of added bureaucracy.
Director Morrison.
Yeah, thank you. I'm too interested in this and a little different perspective than Director Kuhn on this in that I think it's important that we know where our potable water is going and its uses and the likes. And, you know, I see a once a year, once a season form for somebody that's obviously going to be charging a pretty good penny for providing these services is more than reasonable. But I'm kind of curious in that you're looking at the bottom of page 2 and then on to page 3, we've got a hydrant use permit tank fill up to 12,000 liters for $25 that can be at Bings Creek. So we're actually measuring a volume. And then for the next part, on the top of page 3, we're going to a time frame. And it just seems curious that we're using two different measurements. One's volume, one's time, and I'm not saying that there's a better solution for that. But I think another thing that I'd like to raise is that yes, Yubo does have great sources of water and it's plentiful and for the most part wouldn't be subject to stage 3 watering restrictions. But there's also the matter of if we're asking residents to be on stage 3 or the province issues stage 3, that we don't want people out cleaning streets. Bad form in my view. So can you assure us that you've got sufficient controls and policies in place to ensure that that sort of scenario doesn't develop?
Madam Chair, that's exactly one of the intents. Like we need to know who they are so that we can tell them we definitely do not want to have the situation where we're telling our own customers that they can't water their lawns at all, but we're allowing water to be used on the street. I mean, that's not going to go well, and the perception would be very poor. And it's also wouldn't be a priority use by comparison, right? So yes, indeed, that would be that's one of the intents of having a little forum and these sort of things, so we know who they are, we can get a hold of them and say, sorry, but we've got stage 3 restrictions. And even in Yubo, we've had in the past where there's been stage 3 restrictions either region-wide or in the corridor area because of concerns over flows in the river. You know, and that's been decided collectively amongst the various jurisdictions, and if that's the case, that's the case, and sorry, if the customers have that kind of constraint, so would the water users for the hydrants.
Okay. Alternate Director Haim.
Thank you. Just questions through you to staff. 2 parts, just confirmation that these funds are kept on a fund type basis. So for example, for Shellwood, if it's something collected for Shellwood, it stays within Shellwood. Okay.
Absolutely, Madam Chair.
Regional
We would, to be frank, it'd be a lot easier if we didn't have to do that, but we have to do that, yes.
I know. The second question, I understand the idea of going to a consistent charge, but, for example, going from the 3,500 to the 7,000, where's that number coming from? Is it based on some projections, or is it just acceptable, or?
Yeah, so that's a very good question, actually, Madam Chair, and it's a difficult one for us to deal with. In a larger municipality, North Cowichan, for example, where there's a lot of resources, they go through a DCC policy, right? A development cost charge is called. And in that case, they do calculations, they have engineering studies, and they work out exactly what the imposition to the system is of each additional home, right? And so based on all the costs for upgrades, they divide up an amount of capacity they would have in terms of homes, and they develop a cost charge that they charge for each unit. We could do the same, and we probably should be doing the same at some point, but that's a lot of work. And if you have a small water system or a small sewer system, it's just far too expensive. We couldn't go to our customers and say, oh, we're going to have to charge you $2,000 this year because we're doing a DCC policy. It's just not doable. So what we have done, though, we've worked with finance on this, and they've asked for some general costing for the kinds of costs that we see in our systems. And they believe that that would be satisfactory, at least at this point. There's a defense there that's reasonable. None of these charges are unreasonable for the kind of systems we have. Again, I've said this before, but it's a useful statistic to think of. When you go to a BC Water and Waste Association conference or whatever, and people are talking about water systems or sewer systems, and they're talking about small water systems or sewer systems, their number is 10,000 customers. Our largest one is about 1,000 customers, and some of them are 30, which is subatomic on that scale. And it's, I'm confident that if it ever came to it, if there's ever pushback on this, that if we are before the courts on it, given our limited capacities in these situations, it's a reasonably defensible charge. It's not any kind of extortion of funds or anything that seems way out of line. I think it'd be quite defensible.
Seeing no other questions, motion to move the recommendation? Moved and seconded? Seconded by Director Smith? Yes, I'm going to let him read it this time. Sorry. I want to move right along. Mr. Blackwell?
Thank you. The recommendation before you is that it be recommended to the board that bylaw 4265, Water System Management Bylaw 2019, be forwarded to the board for consideration of first three readings and adoption.
All in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Moving on now to R5, Mr. Dennison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Very similar to the water side. This is our sewer side. Similarly, connection fees are being changed to capital charges or capacity charges. In this case, we have two divisions, and that's basically in our systems. We have a number of systems where we have to meet a Class A standard, which is a very high standard. In fact, again, if you look around the province at other sewer systems, even for very large municipalities and cities, none of them practically are meeting a Class A standard, and we do that with 100 customers. And you just don't see that anywhere else. It's very, very challenging. So we've worked out some costs. Again, the generic costs that reflect. It's about $10,000 for just the treatment part to meet a Class A standard for one home. And so we've got that $10,000 plus something allowance for sewer pipes and pump stations and all those kinds of things. So for the Class A ones, we've got $13,500, and for the ones that are not Class A, we've got $6,000. We also, again, have lower rates for the secondary suites and small suites. For the Class A, it'd be $2,000, and for the non-Class A, it would be $1,000, with exactly the same sort of reasoning as on the water side. In Cowichan Bay, we already had some specialized rates for liverboards and float homes based on expectations of their use, and we would be recommending to maintain that as well. There's also an update in the bylaw on source control language, which our solicitor provided for us a while ago, and so we've incorporated that from him in the wording that we have in here.
Are there any questions for staff? Seeing none, somebody like to move the recommendation? It's been moved and seconded. Mr. Blackwell, do your magic.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The recommendation before you is that it be recommended to the board that bylaw 4266, Sewer System Management Amendment Bylaw 2019, be forwarded to the board for consideration of first three readings and adoption.
Call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Moving on now to unfinished business. Is this where I will put the correspondence? So we're moving back to the correspondence. AVICC is looking for input from Electoral Area Directors Forum. Director Morrison.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and would just highly recommend for those, and I hope everyone's planning to attend AVICC in Powell River, that this forum for just electoral area directors started, I think it might have said 2015. 2015, 2016, has been well attended, very well received, and it's an opportunity for directors to meet with our compatriots in electoral areas in our region, in our area association region, and would highly recommend that if you don't have scheduling conflicts, that you attend this. And I think the ask here is, if there's a particular item of interest to you or to your local government, that you might send in a note for them to sort of categorize and stream some of the discussion.
Before April 5th.
Yeah, so I would strongly suggest, either individually or collectively, regardless, that if you've got an idea, that you send it to the writer of this, which it looks like is vanessa.craig@rdn,
But also,
and put those forward, so.
yeah, and also, Director Nicholson wanted this back. Is there something that you'd like a collective correspondent to correspond with, like the electoral area directors as a whole, or will you be doing that on your own?
Well, I guess I'll do it on my own, but I mean, it strikes me that we had a half a day of strategic conversation yesterday, and the fact that we don't really have anything.
So are you going to recommend, is there something that you'd like to bring forward that we send to them as a group that stands
Well,
out? We
there-
did speak in
that
2017
we-
Ministry of Transportation.
Well, I know that we sent some resolutions, did we not already, to AVIC in general?
Yes.
And so I would be interested in, you know, an electoral area conversation about private forest lands and watershed health. I'd also be really interested in a conversation about tree bylaws and our inability to do tree bylaws, and the issue around heat stress in the future. And, you know, we have a very limited ability to protect trees in our, what I think are pretty urban areas in many cases, so that's an issue for me. I'm sure I could come up with lots more. They're mostly climate change related, but so I'm not quite sure how to pitch it.
So I'm looking
I'm
around.
sorry, I really didn't think about.
Okay, so possibly you could do that one on your own, or we are meeting again on the 2nd? I don't know if we want to quickly,
Well, I'll send a note to her, and maybe we could,
okay.
I think it's always stronger if we have a unified
Right, well, if,
position on things.
okay, Director Morrison.
Yeah, I certainly understand Director Nicholson's desire to move some of these items forward and bring them into the light as far as not only just AVICC but UBCM. And I would just suggest that maybe we do take some time between now and our next meeting, because one of the things is, as part of the resolution review, as a member of the AVICC executive, the UBCM does a lot of research on previously submitted resolutions, and even our resolution, which is that we recommended go in regards to strong fiscal futures. It's an item that's been dealt with by UBCM in the past, and normally would not be considered separately, but we have a new government, and as it turns out, UBCM is interested in restarting and re-engaging on that particular item, so it will receive some special attention at UBCM, and good that we sent it in. But my point, more to the point on what we might come up with in the next couple of weeks, and in time to send it in, is look at whether or not we've had any discussions like this. For instance, the tree cutting bylaw, that's local government act modernization. It's been brought up many, many, many times, and that would fall into that category. There's a number of that have already been listed, MOTI and the likes. They are, I believe, for this electoral area forum, looking for new and emerging or areas of discussion that haven't been had before. So I think you've got a point with climate change and the environment's ability to adapt is certainly something that hasn't been dealt with before and should possibly be developed, and we could send something in as a group that you know may meet the standard for discussion.
Mr. Blackwell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just as a suggestion, you may wish to channel your ideas through to Brian Crothers, assuming that he has the capacity to assemble, these ideas and bring them forward for the next EASC, and you can, based on that, decide whether you want one or more as part of a resolution that he could draft.
Okay, so we'll continue that conversation. Thank you. Moving on now to new business.
No new business, Madam Chair?
Okay, question period. Now, I believe that you had a question. Sorry, I've forgotten your name already.
It's Scott.
Sorry.
Can I
Yeah, and Mr. Blackwell, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For reasons of due process, I understand that the owner of 1812 Shawnigan Lake Road is in attendance and does wish to address the committee. Based on what you hear following that address, you are entitled to make any further resolutions that you may see fit or not. In other words, the resolution that is now passed is not one that is necessarily one you have to stay with. You have the freedom and flexibility to entertain any further resolutions with respect to this matter after you hear from this delegate.
Thank you. I'm Scott O'Neill. I'm the new owner of 1812 Shawnigan Lake. So as Mr. Morano mentioned, I bought the place in September of 2017. And I feel that I did do my due diligence when researching the property, and there's a few key points that I believe that Mr. Morano missed. Before I purchased the place, I did contact the CVRD and ask the planning department if there was any bylaw files open or if there was any information in the file. There was none. That was in 2017. I guess this, because it wasn't finalized yet, it was still on the bylaw officer's desk, and that's why I didn't have any access to it, which I thought was a bit odd. But nonetheless, after I purchased the place last summer, I believe it was in McDonald, stopped by the place and just mentioned that this is all going on. It was news to me, and it was basically described to me that the previous owner had repaired the deck, not replaced. And the portion that we're talking about, it's actually only between 6 inches and a foot on the actual property. The whole rest of it is trespassing on timber westland. So I don't really know the next steps after the notice of title, but I feel it's a little bit unfair to be going down this road when I didn't do the work and did the due diligence to research it. Do you guys have any questions for me? And this is specifically just the deck we're talking about. The wall, I guess, is a non-issue just because it was determined, I guess, that they repaired the top cap, and that's not even on the property. It's trespassing as well. And to legalize this, like Mr. Morano said, is a nightmare because the majority of the structure isn't actually on my property, it's on Timber West property, and the original structure was built in the 50s, which predates everything to do with the CVRD, which was why I thought there was nothing in the building file for it.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your
Any
input.
questions?
Director Kuhn.
With the notice on title, what are the possible ramifications if he wants to sell his property again? Like, what would come up?
You're asking staff, Mr. Blackwell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Director Kuhn. Notice on title, it provides notification to any prospective purchaser that there are outstanding infractions or issues that should be discovered through the process of due diligence that may or may not have an effect on asking price or the saleability or any other such matter. It's a case-by-case basis. Some folks may choose to not be bothered by that and acquire the property anyway. That can have issues with regard to establishing a mortgage. If somebody doesn't need a mortgage, it's not a financial encumbrance with respect to that. So I can't give you a black and white answer that if A happens, B follows. It depends on the specifics of the scenario involved.
Director Wilson. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I understand that you did your due diligence. You contacted the CVRD, and everything that you got back from them didn't indicate that there was any kind of problem on that building. Is that correct?
Correct.
And follow up.
Yes.
Was this by voice only, or was there any?
It was, and
correspondence?
I've asked if you guys record the lines, and apparently you don't. So I didn't feel the need to get a paper trail because there was nothing.
Okay.
If there had been something, I would have asked for it, but with there being absolutely nothing in that file, I didn't see the need to get a document saying that there's nothing. It just seemed a little bit pointless to me. And in regards to the property value, I'm absolutely certain it'll have a detrimental effect on the property, because if you now have a property that somebody potentially can't mortgage, that's going to decrease the number of buyers out there that can afford it.
Director Kuhn.
So I guess this registration on the title is more or less, we feel compelled to do it, even though no action is being taken. Right? I mean, that's...
Mr. Blackwell.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you to Director Kuhn. So notice and title is one of the many tools associated with dealing with an action like this. As you can imagine, actions can start at any given point in time, and before an action is concluded, it can see many different property owners. Actions that relate to the property frequently, and less so with respect to property owners. So this has more to do with dealing with an infraction associated with the property, and it's not specific to an individual. So there are other tools available to the board as well.
I wonder if we could have a discussion about in closed session, about that.
You need a motion for that.
Yeah, I move that we have a discussion about that in closed session.
Director Wilson, you're seconding that motion? Okay, this is on the motion to go into,
Madam Chair,
okay,
you have to say under what section of the community charter.
okay. Which section of the community charter?
Likely by law enforcement.
Okay, so it'll be go into closed under bylaw enforcement. So that is the motion on the floor. Is there any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. One person opposed, and we will move that into closed. Right now, we'll go, Director Wilson.
Excuse me. Excuse me, Madam Chair?
Yes?
We just passed a motion to go into closed. We have to go into closed now.
Oh, okay, good. Well, I'm getting up to date on all my chairing today.
And is,
Okay, so we have a motion to go into closed. We'll move into closed under bylaw infractions. So we will now need to. You don't have a point of order because you're in the gallery. It's not a point of order around here. So we need to. 5-minute break. We're gonna have a 5-minute break.
okay.
Okay. Yeah, because that's what she's, okay, let's tell her. And I will start where we left off. If the committee has any more questions for this application? Seeing none, I'd like to thank you very much for coming. And the resolution will be on the March 27th board.
March, so I have the opportunity to come back and dispute, or?
You can come back on the board, but I don't know if there won't be another opportunity. Yes, there will be at the board meeting, public
Okay.
input period at the board meeting.
So that's, let me just check here, in,
Wednesday, the 27th.
so next week.
Yep.
Chair, I believe he can also ask for a delegation.
I don't know what a delegation is.
Thank you very much.
So can I just clarify what is happening? So is the motion still, has it been passed?
The resolution was made and passed, and it'll come to the board March 27th.
Okay, and then I have the opportunity to show up.
Public input, you have you can put some input on what will be on the agenda.
Right. Could I also just mention one more thing?
Sure.
So it was suggested to me by the bylaw department that my only source of recourse here would be to go after the previous owner in court for damages on this. I did contact a lawyer about that, and he said it's absolutely impossible to win that court case. Reason being, I would have to prove that this deck was built when the bylaw department is saying that it was. And looking back on Google Maps, it's not apparent when it was built because there's been a deck as far back as Google goes, which I believe is 2006. So he said that that's a bit of a dead end. So I don't really know where else to go with this other than showing up on the 27th and telling the same story over again and pleading my case, but.
I'm sorry, that's all we can help you with today, but you
Okay.
have the opportunity to come back March 27th.
All right, same time?
No, March 27th, doesn't have a time. Is it it's an afternoon one, 1:30? Correct, it's a 1:30. We alternate, so it's 1:30. Okay, moving on now to question period. There is no new business, correct? Moving on now to questions. Questions shall be addressed to me and must be truly a question, not statements of opinions. Questioners are not permitted to make a speech. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to ask a question on behalf of this fellow. When the item came up on the agenda and
I'm sorry, you're asking a question on behalf of somebody else?
Well,
What's-
let me
what this
rephrase that. It is question, when this item came up on the agenda, and prior to the motion, the bylaw officer indicated to the committee that the person connected to this case was in the room. Could questions have been asked of the applicant before the vote?
Nope,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
I would like to go back to my question in regards to the crisis within the Land Use Services Department and what I had spoken to earlier at public input, and I apologize if that was the wrong time to go into it, is there seems to be a widening crisis within the land use services. I see on the homepage of the CVRD website that front counter service at the Land Use Services Department is reduced Tuesday till Thursday from 1 to 4:30. And has the committee asked, or should the committee ask the CAO for a report on what is being done to resolve that crisis? Because it seems to be getting worse instead of better.
I think that the staff are looking after it. We understand there is a backlog, and they have to do the timing now just to catch up, and we're working on it. They are working on it. So they're very aware of all of it, so I'm sure the CAO is very aware of it as well. So I don't know what you're requesting of us. That's
I think an
different than that.
update to the public, because it is affecting the ability to provide a service to the public, and there's a trickle-down effect that is extending to the OCP review, the Advisory Planning Commission work, and support as well.
So we'll take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
We will. Any other questions? Seeing none, motion to adjourn? Is there a second? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you very much.